Love me. Cause I want it. Love me. No. Yes, I'm gonna. Love me. Cause I want it. Love me. No more.
everyone. Hello, everyone. Warm welcome to this event of the launch of the Youth Progress Index 2023. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to see this room full of faces interested in young people. I'm Maria Rodriguez Alcázar. I'm the president of the European Youth Forum, that is the largest platform of youth-led organizations in the world, and actually the voice of young people in Europe. It's my utmost pleasure, actually, to welcome you all in this event, excellencies, people that are working together with us in different projects, colleagues, friends of the European Youth Forum. We are very happy to have this event today to launch a tool that will be useful for your work in whichever field you actually work, because we know that you are working with young people, that you are advocating for youth rights, that you are researching on the youth field, or maybe you are just curious about the situation of young people in the world. Let me start by thanking our partners from the Evans Foundation for the support in hosting this event in this wonderful place in Bozar. Thank you also to our media partner, Euroactive, that will be on stage just in a bit. And also thank you so much to the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights of the OSCE, and as well to our regular partners supporting our work at the European Commission and also at the Council of Europe. Thank you so much for making this possible, and thank you also for being here with us today in this big day. What is this event about? What are we gonna do here today? You know that young people and youth, we are a specific and quite often also a vulnerable part of our society. We live a transition between, well, actually many fields, between childhood to adulthood. And actually in this transition, we face different challenges and barriers. So for example, it's most probably familiar to all of you that many young people, we face economic barriers, economic difficulties. We don't find enough employment opportunities, and often many young people also face at risk of exclusion, or we live actually in poverty. But together with all these transitions that we live as we go from childhood to adulthood, there are other barriers, other challenges that we are facing just because of the times that we are living. I'm meaning, for example, well, the pandemic that we just lived a couple of years ago, but also the climate crisis, the challenges and the threats to our democracy, to the civic space, the digital revolution that is putting really so many challenges on us. And then from the European Youth Forum, that we work always on the rights of young people, we work for youth rights, we were wondering, can we measure how is the situation of young people? Can we, in a way, compare how is that situation in different countries? Do we have any indications for this? And I must say that at this particular moment, measuring the progress of young people, measuring the situation of young people is crucial for society, because we can then also measure what's the impact that those situations are happening in society, but also what's the impact that they may have in the future. So by measuring and comparing the situation of young people, we can promote equality and we can promote more fair societies. And by prioritizing also the rights, the demands, the needs of young people, we can create a path that will lead us to more sustainable societies. What we often see is that, unfortunately, we don't always have enough data to see what's happening for young people. And so many times our rights, our needs are overlooked. And especially if we focus on different measures to measure the progress in the world. I'm meaning in particular when we focus on economic growth. So at the Youth Forum, again, we said, we cannot just complain, right? There is not this tool, let's create it. And that's what we did, actually. We are filling this fundamental gap on the information on the situation of young people, and we are there demanding more quality data on youth. And this is just not all. We still make the call to countries, to institutions, to different governments. Please take the collection of data seriously. Please help us on this. Please collect age and gender disaggregated data so then we can also have better policies, better debates, and more informed policies for our societies. So that's how we started, actually. In 2018, together with our partners of Social Progress Imperative, we said, okay, let's start working. In 2019, we launched the first edition of the Youth Progress Index. So this tool that was gathering in just one single point all this information on different indicators on the life of young people worldwide. And then we continued in 2021. Yes, unfortunately, from our homes, we presented the second version of the Youth Progress Index, this time with some advances on sustainability, on climate adaptation. And now here we are. We are presenting the third edition of the Youth Progress Index with a very much improved interactive tool that I hope you will all enjoy. You can, as of now, access the platform that will be online, that is youthprogressindex.com, and in there you will find actually all the information that we will be presenting today as well. But that's not the only thing that we will do today. As you probably saw at the beginning, at the entrance, you saw already some reports. We have a general report on 2023 with the key findings of the Youth Progress Index all across the world. But apart from this, we also have 3 key reports on 3 key topics for young people right now. One is focused on fiscal policies, so that investment that we need for our future. Another one is about civic space and young people. And the third one is about mental well-being. And for this, I thank also our partners from Mental Health Europe for the collaboration. But then why do we do all this? Because honestly, we could just collect the data and keep it for ourselves and then continue working. But that's not just our aim. Our aim is that this tool can be useful for governments to inform their policies, also for advocates for youth rights, that they can also take the data from there and use it to show to the media, to the different stakeholders, but also for researchers to show what's the situation that young people are facing, but also to forecast how that could be better in the future. So now today we are presenting a more refined version of this Youth Progress Index. And let me add that we are very proud of this tool that we created. In words of the Joint Research Center of the European Union, the Youth Progress Index is the most comprehensive measure of young people's quality of life worldwide. And we are really grateful for this recognition. We are convinced that the insights of this Youth Progress Index can bring light not only on the situation that young people are facing right now, but also on the challenges that we need as society, as governments, as institutions to face to improve the situation, not only of young people, but of all our societies. And honestly, I'm very hyped for what is gonna come in the event today. I hope I also managed to transmit this enthusiasm, because we will very soon hear the key results and findings of this Youth Progress Index. To start off with these key findings, we have our keynote speaker for today, for this afternoon. We have with us Ms. Bora Mutsaci, Minister of State for Youth and Children in Albania. And you may wonder also why Albania in this case. Albania has been one of the best performers countries in the Youth Progress Index. It's one of the top 3 improvers in the last 11 years, actually, that we have been collecting data. And we have seen that in Albania, actually, they have significantly improved in policies such as advanced education, specifically for women, but also in housing, that is a challenge in our societies in Europe, also to fight the discrimination against minorities. I must say that overall, young people in Albania, they are feeling much more that they are in charge of their lives. And that's great news, I think, for the country. So we want to congratulate Albania, in this case, through the person of their Minister for Youth. And thank you so much for joining us today. Minister, I hope that this tool will be actually useful for your work. We are aware also that you are already using the tool to monitor how the youth strategy is being implemented, so thank you for that. And please join me in the stage so we can also hear from the experiences of yours. Thank you.
So, dear Maria, I'm going to call you that, or officially like the president of the European Youth Forum, dear esteemed colleagues that work with youth and for youth, and most importantly, dear young people. It's always such a pleasure, and I was sharing with some of the colleagues yesterday from the European Youth Forum that as ministers we get to go on a lot of conferences and we get to discuss with grown-ups and to tell them why it's important to listen to young people and why it's important to actually take into consideration what they think when we take decisions. And sometimes it's difficult to be doing that job, and it's difficult to convince them why we need to focus on young people. But today is particularly easy because I feel myself today surrounded by young people and also people that work for young people. So that's very important, and it makes this whole discussion a lot easier than usual. I'd like to start with one of my favorite quotes. It says that we cannot build the future for our youth, but we can build the youth for the future. And the reason why I always mention this quote and why I always use it, even for the National Youth Strategy, is because I truly believe that if all of us get together, both young people or anybody that is actually engaged in CSOs or working for young people, once we get together, we can actually provide more means, more opportunities, more well-being, and the opportunity to listen to the voices of young people. And I think this can only be done if we're all in synergy with one another and if we collaborate to make sure that our goals and our aims are clearly defined and clearly followed through. It's not just to write it, it's not just to draft a strategy. The most important part is to actually make sure that you carry it out and you make sure that you follow it up, you monitor it, and you evaluate it. And of course, when young people come together, they achieve great things. And the best example that comes to mind is, of course, the European Youth Forum, which has evolved so quickly into a European platform that provides space for dialogue among the youth in Europe, the region as well as beyond. And when I look at the work of the European Youth Forum, one of my favorite products that you have is actually the Youth Progress Index. And even though I didn't get to know it very soon as an indicator, because you have been doing it since 2018, and that's quite an accomplishment, but the moment that I found out about it, even though I was in the beginning steps as a minister, I thought that this would be the best way to measure our success, to measure the impact that we have with all of our policies. And this is the reason why, if you actually research it now and look at the National Youth Strategy of Albania, you'll see that this is one of our key indicators. We're actually using this very good product that you are producing as young people to make sure that we measure our accountability as policymakers, but also as young people ourselves as well. And to be honest, the reason why I really appreciate this index is because I found out that not only do you not gather primary data, you use fully secondary data. So practically a lot of partners that work together with you to gather all the necessary data from all different fields to make sure that you have a real progress indicator for young people. And this is in 150 plus countries. So that's amazing. It really shows that young people, when they want to, they're creative, they're self-aware, and they're critical. And they can really produce products that are useful to policymakers, to governments, to institutions, to CSOs as well. And this is perhaps the first reason why I'm so happy to be standing here today with you. But there is two more reasons that I want to share with you. The second one, again, is a little bit, it gets closer to the European Youth Forum and the models that they have developed. And when you read your mission statement, one of the things that is mentioned in there is that what you aim to do is to empower, to boost youth participation, and strengthen European identity. And these are all three important things that we need to do together. But when we talk about empowerment, the one thing that comes to mind maybe some of you have not heard of it, but it's actually the 8 standards of European Youth Forum for strategy evaluation. And you'd be surprised, and you'd probably are thinking to yourself, how does this relate to empowerment? This is a tool that measures a strategy. Does it really relate to empowerment? In my opinion, in my very modest opinion, I think that holding policymakers accountable and making sure that you evaluate their job does directly link to empowerment, even though it might not feel like something that comes straight to your mind. But this is the reason why, again, this is something that we're also using, and we're really hoping that you can develop it even further, and perhaps to help us out, not to have Albania as the only country that uses this, but to have as many countries in Europe that use this toolkit and makes it easier for us to evaluate ourselves, but also to compare with other countries in the region, in the EU, and why not in the world as well. So I'm very proud that we're using it, but I'm hoping that some of my colleagues here today that work in policymaking will be able to also implement it in their own countries. And last but not least, I would like to thank you once again for awarding Tirana the title of Tirana European Youth Capital. And that was a big accomplishment for us, and the fact that last year in 2022, that's a difficult year, was actually the year that we had 1,000 plus activities. And I know that some of you have been there and you have joined us, and we actually saw a Tirana that was vibrant. It was full of youth energy and spirit. And we actually did something new, as usual. We didn't just stay with Tirana as a European capital, but we went further than that. And we actually spread all of our activities throughout Albania by making sure that young people in rural areas as well as in cities were able to engage and get involved. So thank you for giving us the opportunity, and we hope that we have paid you back and we have made sure that we've shown you a good example of what it means to be a truly European capital. Although we are not part of Europe yet, but we definitely had all the European values demonstrated throughout our activities. And one last reason, I promised you 3 reasons, and the last reason, whilst I was reading the report, it said, amongst the frozen progress for young people in Europe, Albania is one of the countries with the most significant improvement in the last 12 years. And I'm actually happy that this achievement coincides with the fact that Albania has now a dedicated youth minister. And I would like to believe that it's not purely coincidental, the fact that both of these issues are together. And when I received the invitation, I was looking forward to see what the ranking was, and I had a little bit of research. Being an economist by trade, of course, I went into the details, into the numbers, and researched everything. And I saw that in 2011, so this is the first year that you had data available, regardless of not being the first year that the report was published, Albania was ranked 68th. And once again, this was a relative number because it depends on the other countries. But the part that wasn't relative was the number of points we gathered, which was 67.47. And this was in 2011. And meanwhile, I found out that this year, we're actually ranked 60th out of 150 plus countries, and total points of 74.3. And for those of you that lost me, because I know not everybody is good at maths, and not everybody followed the numbers that I just mentioned, to sum it up, what this means is that we have gone up by 8 places, and we've actually gained 7 points, which is quite impressive, and to be honest, it's a moment for us to sit down and realize what have we done well. And again, the moment to say, what can we do better? Because if we're happy with ourselves and if we're content, it's definitely not a good way to go forward. So let's look at this result and say, how can we do better next year? And how we can make sure that we can offer more to young people. And last, I would like to perhaps share a little bit of my experience. Being a Minister of Youth in Albania for 2 years, we have done so many programs that have as a focus in itself the upskilling of young people, but also making that transition that Maria so well put, that transition from childhood to adulthood, because that's a transition that involves education, it involves employment, it involves so many other opportunities in life. And to talk about that, the interesting thing that I always share is that when we started our youth strategy, we didn't write it, young people wrote it. We went around Albania and met 1,200 young people and 50 civil society organizations that deal with youth. We asked them what's important to them, what are the issues and challenges that they face, and only after getting those issues, we lined up the policy measures that we were to be implementing. And this was the part that really helped us out in understanding the issues and the challenges, because we would not have been able to do it by ourselves. Sometimes it's easy to get stuck in the administration and bureaucracy and to say, yes, we do understand what young people need. And the truth is not like that. The truth is that if you do not work with young people, you will never be able to understand the challenges, the plights of their age. So this is why we believe that when we drafted this strategy, we did the important things that young people needed. And perhaps to give you some very short examples, because I'm sure I can spend hours and hours talking about the many different initiatives and measures that we've undertaken. But the first one that we did, it relates directly to empowerment of young people. When I got my position, we had 8 local youth councils out of 61. And these are councils of young people that advise the mayors on policy making. And currently we have 59 youth councils. So that's only 2 more left, practically 59 working, effective, and efficient local youth councils of young people being involved in local policy making. And then again, not only do these people impact their local policy making, but they report to the National Youth Council. They report to the National Youth Council, which acts as an advisory body to the Ministry of Youth, so then I can go to the Council of Ministers and actually convey all the issues and problematics that young people raise. And this is important in terms of empowering them. But then again, another thing that we've actually done, which I always want to mention, is making the National Youth Agency more transparent and more efficient. And I know that sometimes when we talk about countries like Albania or perhaps the Western Balkans in general, it's difficult to understand that our methodology and way of thinking is a bit different from the EU. And this is why we decided what's the best way to get in the EU. Let's take a methodology that they use and implement it for our grant giving. So we did precisely that. And now for the first time we have an institution that does the grant giving with the same methodology that the UN uses and that the EU uses. So practically we're a step ahead, because I believe that young people are the ones that actually make those steps a little bit faster than the older generation sometimes, or even politicians as well. And last, there is one more program I wanted to share with you. As of January 2023, we have created an extracurricular program in Albania that has involved about 10,000 students that have been enrolled for free in arts, crafts, technology, environment, agriculture, and empowerment through self-defense. These courses are offered for free to them by the government in order to ensure better inclusivity for young people, as well as better targeting of vulnerable groups. And this is something that will allow them to focus on these areas of talents that they have. And we haven't just stopped with arts and crafts. We've actually gone further, and we've developed a program with sports as well, where again, about 10,000 young people have been involved. And they play basketball and volleyball. They play it 3 times a week. And they're actually involved in championships as well, which allows them not only to build their talent, but also to avoid getting involved in those difficult habits that are sometimes difficult to leave behind, and to as well keep more healthy and make sure that they're able to lead a life that has good habits instead of those terrible habits that we wouldn't want our young people to have. And this, again, are a few of our programs that we have implemented in a nutshell, but it's not all we're doing. And of course, there is a long way forward to ensure that young people in Albania, and this is important, they feel free to travel and go abroad to further their education, to further their studies, and all of the above. But the important part is that they also know how to find their way home and to actually come back and invest in their own countries. So with this last remark, I would like to once again thank you so much for making me part of this wonderful activity, and I really look forward to listening to the rest of the progress. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you, Bora, for joining us today, but also congratulations on the good progress and for sharing. Thank you for sharing some of the secrets that you have in Albania, right? That are actually not secret for youth organizations, because that's actually what we ask to institutions to implement, and also to have this participation and this constant dialogue with youth organizations. So thank you for this. And I know that within the authorities that we have today in this room, we have the ambassador of Moldova, that is actually also one of the key top performers key improvers, in the Youth Progress Index. So also congratulations on this. And I want to encourage you to continue the good work, but also to continue using the Youth Progress Index, as you already mentioned, in your work in the ministry. With this, I think we can go to our next speaker. Actually, we have a video prepared. It's a person that most probably will be familiar to you. She's Iliana Ivanova. She's the commissioner that is in charge of youth, and she wanted to send us a message for us today.
Dear Minister Mosaki, dear President Alcazar, ladies and gentlemen, dear young friends, I'm very pleased to address you today, even if only virtually, and use this event to reiterate my support to Europe's young generation. We have namely a great responsibility towards you, the young people of Europe, in particular to provide you with opportunities in the form of education, jobs, and affordable housing, to support your physical and mental health, and to make sure we care for a planet that is well preserved. These are responsibilities the EU is committed to uphold. Today's event is dedicated to the 2023 Youth Progress Index, which will provide us with valuable insights into the reality of youth. It will paint the state of young people's well-being, access to rights, and quality of living. These data, covering 150 countries around the world, are very much welcome. They will support us shape policies to help today's youth build a more sustainable and inclusive world. Last year, during the European Year of Youth, we put your concerns very high on the political agenda. Together, we made sure that our message that young people are Europe's future was heard. More than this, we worked tirelessly to gather young people's views on the most pressing issues in their lives. Now, as the year slips into our rear-view mirror, the EU is striving to ensure we do our best to address these issues, and that our message that our youth is Europe's future is here to stay. This is why between 2021 and 2027, we're putting to work approximately 2.5 billion euros under our flagship program for youth, Erasmus+, to ensure young Europeans have numerous opportunities and inherit a planet which has been well looked after. We all know that more needs to be done, and we are committed to make the most value of our efforts. I thank the European Youth Forum for your contribution and dedication to improve the quality of life of our youth, and I count on your continued work towards our common ambition. Together, we will offer the young people of Europe the future they deserve. I wish you a fruitful and successful event.
Well, I ask for an applause for this video, the Commissioner. And I'm pretty sure that at this point of the event, you are already eager to know what's the results of this Youth Progress Index, what has happened in the last 11 years, actually. But for this, no spoilers from my side. I will invite on the stage two of our colleagues to actually go through the data, go through the main findings of the reports. I hope you all grabbed some reports at the beginning, but otherwise, just at the end of the event, you will also have them. They're there to be enjoyed and to be spread. And with this, I want to welcome on stage these two speakers. One is my colleague from the board of the European Youth Forum, Andrea Alexandra Scriostiano, board member of the Youth Forum, and Petra Krylova from the Social Progress Imperative, partner research director in there. So please join me on stage to get to know a bit more about the findings of the Youth Progress Index. Thank you.
Personal rights, media censorship, access to justice, Interested in how your country performs and want to make a difference for the world of tomorrow? We believe sustainable development and well-being should be at the top of the agendas. That's why we created the most comprehensive tool, combining youth-relevant data from more than 150 countries on dozens of parameters, the Youth Progress Index. A unique instrument that goes beyond merely economic indicators. This provides you with the necessary background to challenge policies and build a more sustainable and inclusive world. Want to make a difference for the world of tomorrow? Use it.
As you have seen in the video, we measure factors that matter most to young people. I'm Andreea Scrioșteanu from the European Youth Forum, and this is the Youth Progress Index. It covers more than 150 countries of the world and also 60 indicators that are social and environmental sensitive over a 12-year span. And this is more than just a tool. This is a crucial step in rethinking on the ways we view progress, but also building fairer societies. It enables public authorities and civil society organizations to systematically identify and prioritize the topics that really matter and the challenges that really affect young people, removing barriers to well-being. By providing a robust framework and solid data, the Youth Progress Index empowers the youth and paves the way for sustainable progress. Today, we'll present to you the framework and the results of the Youth Progress Index of the 3rd edition. And you will be able to visualize what we're saying through a very interactive presentation on our website that we will have here, and also show the brand new results. But firstly, Petra, would you please guide our audience through the methodology that we use for the index?
I will be delighted to. Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, thank you very much to our colleagues at the European Youth Forum for really all your efforts in creating, spearheading the Youth Progress Index for so many years. The methodology and the framework of the Youth Progress Index are anchored in the Social Progress Index. I'm Petra Krylova. I'm the research director at Social Progress Imperative. We're a nonprofit established in 2012, helping NGOs, businesses, policymakers, academics around the world measure social progress. How is the Social Progress Index and the Youth Progress Index different from other measures, other frameworks you might know, you might be aware of? Our methodology represents a robust and holistic measurement framework for social and environmental performance. It follows 4 key design principles. Firstly, the index considers exclusively social and environmental indicators. No economic indicators are included in the framework. Not because we would think or we would want to advocate that economy is not important, certainly not. But by being able to unpack the two, we can better understand the relationship, the associations, how one affects the other. So the framework only considers social and environmental indicators, key principle 1. Key principle 2, we measure outcomes, not inputs. We do not measure how many teachers, doctors, hospitals, schools there are, how much countries spend on education and healthcare. We measure the real lived experience of people, and in this case, young people around the world. Thirdly, any indicator that we include needs to be relevant for the units we are measuring. In our case, it's the countries. This is often easier said than done because countries have very different contexts, very different realities. But I truly believe the index is a very robust and solid measure of societal performance for young people. And fourthly, last but not least, even though I come from academia originally, I like to say the index is not meant to be an academic exercise. It is really meant to drive action, create positive change. And it was so nice to hear how countries such as Albania are using the index to achieve exactly this. But besides these principles, we have also developed a different approach, a different methodology for assessing relative performance of countries. We do not compare all countries against one another. To assess relative performance, we create peer groups of countries based on their economic performance. The countries that are closest, 15 countries that have the most similar performance in terms of GDP per capita, are the peer group that we then assess other countries to. And you can see this map on the website is the demonstration of that assessment. Andrea, what else can we learn from the website and the index?
Well, Petra, it's it's very tempting to assume that wealthier countries are naturally at the top of the charts, right? But that's not the full story that we found out. A compelling result comes from our analysis, as Petra was mentioning. When a country's GDP per capita crosses the $10,000 margin, the strong correlation disappears. And it becomes less about money and more about political choices. Because governments must prioritize policies that place young people at the forefront of the political agenda. For instance, Portugal and Luxembourg, as you can see on the slides, have similar youth progress scores, yet Portugal achieves it with half of the GDP of Luxembourg. And yes, it's true that traditional economic indicators like the GDP fall short in measuring the broader dimensions to human well-being and societal advancement. And the following becomes quite clear. GDP is not fit for measure, nor is it an excuse. It is about which political choices you make as a country, where you invest, and how you decide to invest. And our analysis suggests that to improve the scores, we need to go beyond looking at the economic growth. Young people's opportunities depend on society's commitment to support them, enhance their democratic participation, and strengthen their personal freedoms and rights. Is that right, Petra?
Indeed. And let's have a look at what has happened over the last 12 years. First, let's look at the structure of the index. You see there are three, what we call the dimensions: basic human needs, foundations of well-being, opportunity. In each dimension, we have four components: nutrition, water, shelter, safety, education, information, health, environment, rights, freedoms, inclusiveness, and access to advanced education. Have a think, in which area do you think we have achieved the greatest gains over the last 12 years? Where have we improved the most? And also, do you think we only made improvement? Any guesses that you would like to share? Education? Advanced education? Education. Housing? Well, in the past 12 years, we have made remarkable achievements in access to information and communications. An increase of nearly 30 points. You will see this is a random number, it's 27.5 to be precise. This has certainly enabled young people to be better connected, to be better able to communicate. That's the good news. But there is also the not so good news. We have not seen such improvement in other areas of the index. We and young people are not much safer in 2022 compared to 2011. Our progress on environmental quality also cannot really be called progress, but a stagnation. In addition, with a score of 55.38, environmental quality is a serious risk to the health of a young citizen. These disparities in different areas of progress underscore the uneven nature of efforts towards the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda, highlighting the need for targeted efforts to ensure that progress continues to be achieved in all the critical areas of young people's well-being and social progress. But I'm afraid the bad news doesn't stop there. Even greater concern is the evident deterioration of young people's personal rights. The Youth Progress Index component, personal rights, measuring things such as young members of parliament, freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom of discussion, access to justice, and freedom of religion, experienced a decline, a significant decrease of 6.4 points. Andrea, that's very distressing, but what does this all mean?
Well, today on average, if you are a young citizen of the world, your political and civil rights are at risk of being violated. If the whole world were a country, it would have a score similar to one of Senegal or Azerbaijan. If you are a young person in this world, your participation and representation in political sphere are severely undermined. This decline raises serious alarms of the state of youth empowerment and the safeguarding on the fundamental rights. Urgent attention and proactive measures are needed to reverse this and ensure that young individuals exercise their rights and participate fully in shaping their societies. And more so than these concerns, the level of inclusiveness for a young individual is incredibly low. This suggests that young citizens face barriers to equal acceptance and opportunities within society based on origin, gender, ethnicity, sexual preferences. Concerns arise regarding overall opportunities that young people are available to, and also about the right to make life choices, personal growth, inclusion in the societies they live in. And so, Petra, what about individual countries?
Indeed. Let's zoom in and look at what some of these countries have achieved. And I think we can all celebrate the fact that 73 countries, including Albania, achieved significant improvements during this period. These countries are found in all parts of the world. In addition, a further 68 countries made some level of improvement. What countries do you think these might be that made the greatest improvement over the last 12 years? You don't need to share, it's okay. Nepal and Uzbekistan. Two Asian countries made the most improvement in youth progress since 2011. Uzbekistan, in particular, has significantly exceeded the average results of its economic peers. However, both countries are lagging far behind safeguarding personal and political rights and struggling with environmental quality concerns. Similarly to components, there are countries that made progress, made significant progress. There are countries that stalled, and countries that unfortunately experienced a decline. Any guesses on those declining countries? Well, you might have seen a bit of it already, but 5 of them might not be too surprising. Venezuela, Syria, Libya, Central African Republic, and Lebanon. All countries suffering from chronic crises. So it's perhaps not that surprising that their performance on the Youth Progress Index declined. But there are 2 other countries that have also experienced a decline: the United States and Canada. And this is the result of a mix of factors. Decline in many indicators. High dissatisfaction with the availability of affordable housing, decline in mental well-being, and in the US, also concerns relating to discrimination, violence against minorities, political rights, and academic freedom. The results for North America are a bit distressing, aren't they?
Yes, they are. From our perspective, we can see some of the common challenges that young people face, irrespective of their regions. In Europe, we are already witnessing what we are talking about, frozen progress. And why is that? Because despite its overall high results, Europe has made little progress since 2011, and it is only second worst to North America, where youth progress is in decline. And in Europe, progress is stuck since 2019, which is the last European elections. 2 European countries are also among the 5 that have made no progress over the past decade, which is UK and France, paired with New Zealand, Australia, and South Sudan. In the Europe alone, the results demonstrate regress in dissatisfaction with housing affordability. Some of you guessed that when we were talking indicators. 1 in every 2 young people in Europe are not satisfied with the availability of affordable housing. The worst situation is in Turkey, Slovenia, the Netherlands, and Portugal. The trend has only worsened in the last 12 years. And as you can see on the graph, the worse the situation, the lower the score. Because at 0 you have the worst score, and at 100 you have the best performing countries. And among the many issues visible in the analysis, the European Union is also facing several challenges concerning young people's rights to freedom, with decreases in freedom of peaceful assembly, academic freedom, access to justice, and freedom of religion. These scores demonstrate the pressing need for policymakers to prioritize policies and measures that protect fundamental freedoms and youth rights. And please, Petra, tell us more about this.
When we look at the EU in comparison to the average performance of the 15 countries closest in terms of GDP per capita, so creating our peer group, we see that the EU is performing within expectations at best on many areas. However, the worst performance, and I think if you maybe click on the arrows and we see the details in the dimensions, if that's possible, the tech team, that might be helpful. We will see that the worst performance of EU is depression rate, health problems preventing from activities, and satisfaction with air quality. I guess it's not really possible to see the details, maybe, not at this stage, but that's fine. If you go on the website, you will be able to access the scorecards for all countries that are included in the index, and you see the levels of relative performance that we have that is overperforming, above expectations, yellow, within expectations, below expectations, and underperforming. And especially those underperforming areas really provide the roadmap, really provide the guidance to what questions do we need to still be asking, what answers do we not have, what further policies do we need to implement so that the rights of young people are upheld in all areas, social, environmental, as well as the economic.
There is a dramatic drop indeed into political and personal rights globally. And this is deeply concerning as it hinders young people's ability to participate freely in political processes, safeguard their rights, and advocate for their concerns. And to shed light on this issue, we actually analyzed data from the Youth Progress Index in the last 12 years. And for now, I would invite you to delve into some key findings from our first report that is dedicated on civic space of young people. We analyzed the right to peaceful assembly, that is the cornerstone of a healthy democracy. And if we look at the Council of Europe, member states, the overall result decreased on average by 9 points in regard to freedom of peaceful assembly, which is concerning for us. And this really highlights the need for focused efforts to address specific issues and ensure the protection of this important right in all regions, as well as the need for a really coordinated approach by global strategic actors, especially international institutions and other stakeholders. And about that, we are very eager to see the panelists today and discover what they can do about it. Similarly, in the last 12 years, the extent to which young people enjoy the freedom of expression steadily decreased almost everywhere. And I want to ask you, Petra, what are other things that are highlighted in our findings?
And freedom of expression was one of the areas that we explored in more detail in particular. And the research highlights that higher rates of freedom of expression and assembly are actually associated with higher performance on inclusiveness. This emphasizes the importance of inclusive society, where different groups can engage in constructive dialogue and live together. Conversely, high rates of political violence are negatively associated with youth inclusiveness. Political violence creates fear and instability and discourages young people to participate in decision-making. This means that we really need to address political violence as a barrier to young people's engagement and young people's inclusiveness. The report, which I invite all of you to read, also analyzes other important aspects of enabling civic space for young people. We looked at the association between political rights and access to justice, and how the engagement of young people in political associations positively correlates with personal rights in the entire society.
Well, safeguarding civic space is not just a matter of youth rights. It is a matter of vitality of our democracies and the future of our societies. And this is why it is essential for the mental well-being of young people, which brings us to our second report, that is one related to mental health and well-being of young people. We have just seen our fundamental rights and freedoms enable a healthy and inclusive society. And in this report, we are focusing on the impact of social factors that have on mental well-being of young people. And we really analyzed the role of an inclusive society in fostering positive mental health outcomes. Social inclusion is not a merely binary concept of inclusion or exclusion from the labor market, for example. It encompasses various aspects of life, such as education, to a sense of community and belonging. In essence, it's about creating an environment where every young person has an equal opportunity to live their potential in life. And please, Petra, tell us about what we should be looking at in the mental health and well-being.
Rather than looking at mental health in isolation, we actually looked at the so-called risk and protective factors. For instance, we looked at education. And the findings suggest that providing opportunities for early education and ensuring equal access to education can contribute to promoting better mental well-being among young people. These results, of course, underscore the importance of educational and gender equality policies as crucial factors in supporting positive mental health outcomes for young people. Another key factor that we looked at is the community safety net. The correlation between the possibility of having a support system and network of relatives and friends during times of need and depression. And this correlation really signals that we need to prioritize the creation of nurturing environments that extend beyond the safety of home and can empower young people to be involved in decision-making. A key factor is also given by the extent to which people feel control over their life choices. We found that greater autonomy in decision-making positively influences mental well-being.
Indeed, social inclusion is key for mental health. But young people cannot find a roof over their heads, as we have seen, nor a job. So the research proved that higher levels of youth unemployment are associated with increased mental health burdens in terms of depression among young people, but also so many others. Many young people are stuck in insecure forms of work with feelings of uncertainty and instability, causing financial strain, stigma, poverty, and material deprivation. Fostering educational and gender equality policies, securing quality employment conditions that provide a fair salary, better regulation in working time, and providing adequate support system can play a crucial role in mitigating these negative effects on the mental health of young people.
Indeed, and we have also analyzed depression rates per region. And what appeared was a very complicated and a complex picture, with notable disparities among young people across the globe and within regions. In general, when it came to depression, young people in the East Asia and Pacific regions tend to cope better. Sadly, Europe made no progress in addressing depression in the last 12 years. And countries exhibit wide range of scores, with Greece being the lowest performer in the region and in the continent. But that's just an additional confirmation. Greece is also the lowest European country, second just to Greece, for freedom over life choices and underperforming its peers in vulnerable employment. It is crucial, though, to acknowledge that the assessment of mental health really goes beyond depression. And we are still missing valuable information that would encompass a more holistic, more complex, and more complete picture of mental health. So, simply said, there is just still so much that we don't know about mental health.
It is not, because we just do not have enough data to measure it. Datasets in the field of mental health and well-being available at regional and global levels are just insufficient, particularly when considering the need for age disaggregated data, gender disaggregated data, and the representation of other minority groups. This should be a collective effort. Policymakers and civil society really need to prioritize data collection and to develop tailored interventions that promote positive mental health outcomes for young people. Because, if I may, one big message, we need the data to have tailored solutions. So please, what did we manage to do instead?
I think we managed to scratch the surface, or rather hammer. The mental health report tells us that inclusion is key. The civic space study tells us that inclusive society goes hand in hand with the safeguarding of political and personal rights and freedoms. But how do we achieve this inclusiveness and inclusive society where young people can thrive?
Fiscal policies. Fiscal policies that will not condemn young people and future generations to bear the burden of these choices. Austerity policies, marked by budget cuts, reduced public spending, often lead to cut in investment in critical sectors for young people, such as education, healthcare, and social services, which we already demonstrated that they have an immediate repercussion on many aspects of our societies. To better prove this point, we analyzed the relationship between public expenditure choices and the Youth Progress Index in the European Union countries. This is our third report. What do we mean by primary expenditure? The amount of money allocated to essential sectors like healthcare, education, and social services. And from our study, it is clear that higher primary expenditure brings better results overall in terms of youth progress. In particular, even small increases in primary expenditures are associated with considerable improvements in the opportunity dimension, which is the third one that we measure, and the opportunities that are within reach. We can have them with the right fiscal policies. But still, the ghost of austerity is haunting our generation. The European Commission's proposal for the European Union Economic Governance Review risks undermining both the quality and the quantity of spending by the EU 27 member states. Under the proposal, those EU member states with a deficit above 3% of GDP will have to reduce their budget deficit by a minimum of 0.5 of GDP each year. And in practice, this would force spending reductions on 14 member states in 2024. And let's have a guess. Which are within the first budgets that are cut by governments when they need to do that? The young people and associated, which we already see will have grave consequences. And it poses a significant problem for those important environmental goals that require public spending and investment, especially since our study demonstrates that all countries at the top of the ranking are progressing as a society at a disproportionate environmental cost. We believe our societies need to go beyond the traditional idea of growth and its implications for global sustainability. So please, tell us more about the global perspective of our study in this case, Petra.
And from the global perspective, following the global expenditure analysis, we looked at the relationship between government expenditure and youth progress in health and education. And the results are clear. Higher spending on these vital sectors positively impacts young people's overall quality of life, their basic needs, their foundations of well-being and opportunities. So adequate funding for education and healthcare is essential for overall youth development. However, while spending on healthcare directly benefits youth, the relationship between education spending and youth progress is more nuanced. Different countries achieve similar Youth Progress Index outcomes with varying levels of educational spending. This means that curriculum design, teaching methods, socio-cultural factors, and other policy choices play a vital role. Investing is not enough. Governments need to pair resources with appropriate and better educational policies.
And on that note, I think we can clearly say that the circle is closed. To implement better education policies, we are sure that involving students and youth organizations is key. We need a world where participation rights and the freedoms are key. And for that, I thank you for your attention. Now please go to youthprogressindex.org to read the full reports and also access our new tool. And before going away, I will welcome our moderator, Mariam Zaidi from Euroactive, our partners, for this event that will guide us to our panel discussion. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. By the way, there are loads of seats here. I can see loads of people who are sort of sitting on the steps and stuff, so don't be shy. Come on, who wants to come and sit? Take a seat. There's loads of space. Okay, so we've had the presentation of the 2023 Youth Progress Index. I think for me, one of the most surprising things I heard was that Europe made no progress on mental health, and that's something that we will unpick a little bit with the panelists. So panelists, as I sort of introduce all of you and introduce what we're going to be talking about with many, many microphones, why don't all of you come up on the stage so we can save a little bit of time as well. So please come up on stage, panelists. Give them a round of applause, maybe. Thanks, perfect. I'll just move this one a little bit. Okay. Okay, so as you were hearing, the Youth Progress Index is a tool that has collected social and environmental data from 153 can shout as well, so but thank you so much for telling me the microphone was not working. Okay, so the data has been collated across 153 countries across 12 years. So that really is a long enough time to understand, you could say, the real-life realities of the young people living today and how we can perhaps improve the quality of the life that you are having. As the other speakers were saying, there have been loads and loads of crises and issues and problems. You know, just in Brussels a few days ago, we had another terrorist attack. We have 2 wars essentially going on, recent wars, and there are so many other conflicts going on around the world. So, you know, the situation, you could say, isn't the best right now. Now, key takeaways on a scale of 0 to 100, Nordic countries and Switzerland rank the best. Sadly, South Sudan and Central African Republic and Afghanistan might not be a surprise. They are the worst, some of the worst ranked countries. An interesting stat I found, and it's going to be one of the questions I will be talking to the panelists about, is one of the 5 countries that have stalled in progress is the United Kingdom. The youth there are dissatisfied with access to clean water, affordability of housing, and healthcare. Are there any Brits in the audience? There you go. I feel sorry for you too. Now, over the next few minutes, we don't exactly have a full hour, so I will ask all the panelists to keep maybe their presentations a little bit shorter, because one thing I really do want to do is we want this to be a little bit interactive. So, a show of hands, first of all, who would maybe like to make a comment, ask a question to the panelists? Who's feeling brave today? Do you have lots of people looking at their mobile phones and looking at other people? Okay, so no one in the audience is going to ask a question to the panelists. Okay, I hope that changes. Okay, well, with that, let's go to the panelists then. We have Matej Gruden. He's the Director of Democratic Participation at the Council of Europe. Welcome. We also have Elena Konturi-Tapiro. Have I pronounced that correctly? Sort of? Almost. The UN Regional Representative for Europe. We have Hannah Stahl. She's the head of Foresight and Innovation at Filia, the Philanthropy Europe Association. And Christina Bakalso. She's from the members of the Pool of European Youth Researchers. Okay, so I'll give you guys the floors. I hope your microphones are working. Matej, we'll start with you first. Just introduce yourself to the audience and tell them a bit about yourself and what you advocate for.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me well? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you to the European Youth Forum and the partners for what you're doing. This was a very interesting presentation. Perhaps interesting is not the right adjective. It's sobering, worrisome. It is very useful for the Council of Europe, mostly because I think it provides a very important quantitative corroboration of what we have seen and what we have been noticing in the Council of Europe in the area that we are responsible for, larger Europe, over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And having that quantitative data is very important, of course, because it helps us to provide empiric evidence for the analysis, and it also helps to identify the solutions to those problems. Now, those trends are very short. I will respect all the instructions. It's basically have been described in the Secretary General's report on the state of democracy, human rights and rule of law, where she said that Europe is facing a democratic backsliding, that democratic environment, Europe's democratic environment, democratic institutions are in mutually reinforcing decline. And I think that the Youth Progress Index is giving us a lot of data that helps us to understand what is happening. I will stop here. I think that for those who would also like to look into why some of the things have happened and what can be done, I would also invite them to look at the Council of Europe work in that area. We've named a number of recommendations to our member states on how to respond to many of the problems that we have faced, that we have heard about today. And we've just had a summit of the states, heads of state and government, which was meant to respond to that problem of democratic backsliding, and which actually, fortunately found out and agreed that one of the main and most important responses is to strengthen youth participation and involvement.
Thank you very much. My name is Elena Kunturi-Tapiero. I'm the acting regional representative for the UN Office on Human Rights here in Brussels. I wanted to thank the European Youth Forum for this invitation and also for this incredible research it has done and giving us this tool on the Youth Progress Index. As I have the floor, let me just say a few things about our organization this year. We're celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is a document that provides the framework for the, of course, enjoyment of human rights by everyone, everywhere in the world. And I think that something that came out of the presentation was the interdivisibility, interdependence, and interrelatedness of human rights. So we've seen how economic, social, cultural rights, and civil and political rights, so the right to adequate housing, right to work, right to health, together with right to freedom of assembly, right to participation, are all interconnected when we are trying to assess to what extent human rights are enjoyed by the youth population across the world. And I also wanted to offer equally sobering figures, unfortunately. So in the latest Secretary General's report on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, there is a finding that we are 286 years away from closing the gender gap on discriminatory laws and practices. So I think that's the additional dimension that we need to bring in. So when we're looking at the enjoyment of human rights by youth, then we also need to break it down in terms of further grouping. So gender is one, race, ethnicity, political or other origin, birth, disability, mental and family status, health status, and so on. But just to say, this is a very good toolbox, and we have other tools as well. So We have a specific SDG target, the Sustainable Development Goals, which calls for high quality, timely, reliable, disaggregated data by gender, age, race, ethnicity. So we have what it takes to track progress, and perhaps we will mention it later, what it is that we can do to help push, advocate with governments and other stakeholders to progress on the enjoyment of human rights. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is Cristina Bacalso. I am a youth researcher. I'm part of the pool of European youth researchers, which is from the partnership of the Council of Europe and the European Commission. We're a pool of practitioners, researchers from academia, from government, which all focus on different aspects of essentially youth development. And my role in particular, I would consider myself to be an applied researcher. I typically look at research which exists, which is out there, tools such as this. I often as well consult directly with young people and together then look at different advice that we can provide or advocate towards for strategies and policies that impact young people with organizations such as at the UN or government organizations, intergovernmental organizations, etc. I'm really happy to be here. I'm a bit of a data nerd. I'm keen to be talking about the Youth Progress Index. For those of you who know, we have had 2 previous other global youth indexes in the last, I would say, 7, 8 years, which have not been able to survive. And the YPI, I'm happy to really see, has continued to survive. The fact that it's in its 3rd iteration is its strength, the fact that it's still around. And an axiom for researchers is really what gets measured counts, right? So if you measure it, it becomes life, it becomes something that's important, and young people count, young people matter. And so I think that it's important that we have such tools. The way that young people are thriving in a society, the way they fare, is really the canary in the coal mine for how our countries, how our societies are doing. And what we heard today is actually a lot of our societies are not doing very well. If we consider even the global average of how young people are faring, we're not in a great scenario. And it's really important that we focus on research, on data for young people, because when young people are thriving, there is what in global health we would call a triple dividend, right? It's important for young people today as a cohort to be thriving in and of itself, to have employment opportunities, to have access to healthcare, to be able to make connections in their community, to participate. But it's also good for societies tomorrow, right? So as young people go through the life course, as they age, as they become leaders or business leaders in their communities, they contribute to overall human capital, the development of our societies, right? So our investments today are not just for people who are young today, but as they continue on into their lives. But there's also a generational perspective, and this is the 3rd dividend, is that it's actually good for future generations, because we know from research that healthy, prospering parents, so parents of the future, are going to be creating the same conditions for their young children, and then that continues to pay itself in the future. So when we talk about young people today, it's important to not just talk about the rights of the young people that exist right now, but that we actually are looking at a societal and generational issue. And so I'm happy here to be talking about this topic, and I'm thankful for the invitation. Thank you.
Happy to continue. My name is Hannah Steide, and I'm Head of Foresight and Innovation at Philea, Philanthropy Europe Association, and I'm happy to have colleagues in this room and a lot of partners. Thank you so much for this great work, for this great data insights, for having told a very nuanced story, not just what is expected, that the wealthy countries are performing better, but really showcasing to us that even with lower GDP levels, countries can achieve more. So it's very nuanced, detailed stories that you're providing. You're giving us red flags, but also telling us the story of hope. And for me, it was a very high point when we started this event and when we have heard the story of Albania improving so vividly in this last decade. I think it's such an inspiring story for all of us. And we know that we live in deep, in times of deep transformation and big societal challenges that we're facing. And hearing stories that progress is possible, and that it's not only about funding, it's not only about money, it's really about meaningful participation of young people. It's about having a long-term strategy in place. It's about talking and listening to the voices of young people. So this is absolutely crucial. And we know that this index, why it is so important, because the voices of young people, they are not represented in public debate. Young people are often not part of decisions when they're being made. Young people are not, they do not have financial power to influence these decisions. And that's why this voice is just often absent, and it's so absolutely crucial to include, meaningfully to include young people and to really understand what are the issues at hand. And it's been an emotional roller coaster, this event, like starting on a high note and then back to reality and seeing that actually not so much progress has been made, even in European countries, even within the EU, a lot of red flags. And then this is also corresponding to the findings we have had at Filea. We have conducted an Exploring 21st Century survey asking philanthropy organizations and also partners, a wide range of research organizations, governments, media, what are the challenges, what are the risks, what are the opportunities, what are the underfunded areas that philanthropy needs to be paying attention to in the next decade, in the next 10 years. And key areas that have come up in this survey are climate crisis and environmental degradation. And this index is demonstrating vividly how even countries that are overperforming with regards to youth development, that this is happening often at the expense of environmental progress. And we need to look in detail here and how we can address this wicked problem and how this is not just about, again, finances and GDP and economic growth, but really about strategies and long-term approach. The second key area is democracy backsliding, as that has been already mentioned by my fellow panelists. This is a huge, huge challenge that we are facing in Europe. Our democracy is in crisis. We see polarization of our societies. We see societal divides. I know this from lived experience. I'm Belarusian myself. The country is figuring in the index as one of the lowest points mentioned when it comes to the freedom of assembly. So we need, this is a big issue we need to address. And finally, also in our findings, mental health and well-being. And I think that this is such a warning signal to all of us. If we hear today that mental health, mental well-being of our young people, of our future is in danger, I think we need to act, and we need to act collectively, because this is really a big issue, and there have been so many signals so that we cannot continue ignoring this.
Thank you so much. I think lots of positivity there from the panelists. But let's now get to the reality of it all. Christina, I'll start with you first. You called yourself a data nerd. You said data informs. But are you seeing it actually being actioned upon? You know, obviously, you said what is measured counts, and that's a brilliant way of looking at it. But is it actually counting?
So I think that as a researcher, we actually know a lot about what the situation of young people is. We know what they need, we know where the disparities are, we know where the gaps are, but a lot of us in the community are unable to actually translate this into action. And I think that this is a challenge which is on us as researchers. We often don't think about the audience of who our research needs to be targeted at. We don't think of how policies actually change from knowing more. You know, so I think that if anything, we live in a society with a glut of knowledge, but actually not a lot of understanding how that knowledge empowers people, how it actually changes policies. And that pipeline between sort of knowledge and policy change is something which I think we need to focus more on. So the fact that we have a usable index is one step, for sure. The fact that every single person in this room, regardless of your education background or how much you know about youth to begin with, can understand an index like this is really important. The next point then is how do we build narratives around it to then empower, in particular, young people, but other stakeholders to actually then feel emboldened by it. You know, what do I do about this? What can my country do to increase my score? What's the heat that I'm feeling as a policymaker, the fact that my country is scoring so low and consistently low? And I think that that is kind of the missing key. We know a lot about the situation of young people, but it's about how do we actually then turn that into action? How do we push potentially people on the streets? That's where movements come in. That's where political action comes in to pair that with the evidence that we have.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, no. Well, I mean, I'll say something perhaps a little bit surprising, but you know, when it comes to action and responses to what we are seeing, I actually don't think it is so complicated or so difficult to find answers to what we are seeing. It's not the main reason to most of the problems that have been presented, especially when it comes to questions of rights and freedoms, but they're all connected with well-being and social and feeling of social justice or rather injustice and frustration that arises from that. So it's not that we wouldn't be able to find solutions. It's not that, you know, governments are just walking around saying we'd really like to improve the situation of young people, we just don't know how. The problems are elsewhere. They are connected to what we have been describing, that actually, you know, that there is, I mean, talking about Europe, but of course that would apply to other parts of the world, that democratic backsliding that is affecting then not just capacities, but the will, the political will to improve, because the way to improvement of the situation of young people would mean strengthening democracy, which is of course not the purpose and objective of many of those who are acting differently. And the second very short point about so far is that, you know, what I really appreciate about this index, of course, is that it covers a whole range of issues, because they are interconnected. Because at the end of the day, even though in the Council we are looking at that, rights and democratic spaces, it is connected with everything and few other things that the index looks at. Because at the end of the day, a democracy to function, what it requires is confidence. Is confidence of people and trust and hope that their life tomorrow is going to be better than life today. Trust and confidence of young people that their situation is going to improve. And when you start losing that confidence and hope, and we see from the index that this is happening, that's when democracy starts to suffer, and that's where alternative narratives are gaining ground. And I'd still like to say just another thing, just a sentence. We should not close our eyes from the fact that this is also affecting young people. Young people are disproportionately affected, punished by the factors that are driving the rise of populism and authoritarian narratives. And that's why a growing proportion of them is losing confidence in democracy and turning elsewhere, and is opening up to those alternatives. I think that's also something that needs to be put there.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up then. Do you think the problem lies in the fact that EU leaders don't actually have confidence in how they're governing or the rules that they've created? I mean, as the kind of representative, you could say, of an EU institution, the EU as a whole, it's very much a rule-making, you know, body, supranational body. So what would you say has gone wrong then? Because I think you said it's not so hard. So if it's not so hard, what's going wrong?
I said it
Easy
is
question.
not so. I didn't say it's not hard. It is hard. Obviously, it is hard. What I said, it is not very difficult to identify what the solution should be. I mean, I think that, you know, if you look at what the index is showing us, when you look our qualitative normative analysis of the situation, the trends that we have seen, when you look at the recommendations that we have prepared over the last couple of years on how to increase democratic participation and civil society space for young people, for minorities, young people from national minorities. The last one was about Roma. You have things there that are solid and they can work. So it's not that, you know, it is actually that we, of course, are struggling with political will to go along that way, because the political consensus that strengthening democracy is really the right way to go is not as strong as it was a little bit back. Secondly, it is because it has an economic fiscal component, And as it has been said at the conclusion, policies affecting young people are among the first ones that are going to suffer when we're looking for the savings. And that, of course, then has the self-perpetuating effect that makes the situation worse and erodes even more confidence, creates even more frustration, creates even more despair, and facilitates even more the path to alternative narratives, populism, other ideologies, nationalism among general population, but also young people. And then actually the possibility, the consensus, the political will to do something about it is reduced even more.
Okay, Elena, I'll come to you then. The United Nations also plays a central role in collecting data. So how much of the Youth Progress Index really supports the findings of the kind of data that you have as well?
Thank you for this question. Let me just say that just link it to also what the previous panelist has said, and also to the trying to find answers to the to these challenges that we see through the index. I think COVID-19 has been a huge challenge, but also an opportunity. I mean, it was a huge challenge because it demonstrated the socioeconomic consequences of policies which basically not investing in health, in housing, in solidarity amongst the population, and it also showed us that we need a more holistic approach to deal with the consequences of COVID-19. And to that extent, our office has spearheaded a program that we call the Human Rights Economy. And it's basically to recognize that all policies, economic, industrial policies, regulations, trade policies, basically you need to do a human rights impact assessment before adopting that policy. And then you need to look at the range of economic, social, cultural, civil, political rights, and what the impact of those policies are, and then define that you need to measure the economic success of a country, and this we've seen in the studies beyond the GDP. So by measuring the environmental impact, by measuring the, I mean, I don't think it was an indicator that you took into account, but by measuring the happiness index, which comes back to the mental health issue, by coming back to the democracy aspect, by addressing corruption, by protecting equality, and by investing in quality education, universal health care, food, policies that can ensure adequate housing and affordable housing for youth who is entering their professional lives and in many instances cannot afford to live independently. And just to come back to your question, the High Commissioner at the latest session of the Human Rights Council in September, which took place in Geneva, he devoted his report to sustainable development. And one of the things we looked at was to what extent youth, even in developed countries, can actually afford adequate housing, to what extent the salaries match the demand and also the prices. And we came to the same conclusion as this study that it's not adequate, and unless you address the problems that the youth of today is facing, then this youth will become adults, and then you will have the same problems, but in adulthood. So it's really very urgent and pressing that we take steps now to address these challenges. Thank you.
So urgent and pressing, but do you feel sometimes that world leaders don't listen to what the UN has to say, and especially to the data, everything that you're telling them to self-improve and to help, especially the younger generations? I mean, we can also look at, what's going on in the world right now. the UN Secretary General is saying a lot of things, but is the rest of the world listening?
Yeah, we did, the index also touches upon youth participation, and I think this is key. Youth participation in decision-making, especially at the international level, because decisions are made now that will impact on your future, and you have to be part of this decision-making. So, I mean, the Secretary General has made youth and youth engagement pillar of his launch of the report of Our Common Agenda, which is basically looking at the challenges the world is facing now, and has called for a summit for the future in 2024, whereby youth has been encouraged to be associated in all the areas that this report is looking at. Peace, is looking at multilateralism, it's looking at sustainable development, environment, and to propose a pact for the future, also from the youth angle. So, I mean, we need you more than ever, and just at the level of the Human Rights Office, we have also created a youth advisory forum to advise us in all the policies that we are considering in our advocacy, awareness raising, and we have 16 young people that have been selected worldwide based on their advocacy and activism, who we associate in all our decision making. So I think it's a concrete step towards having the voice of youth heard and also matter in international policy making.
Okay, well, let me just quickly throw a show of hands, maybe, if the audience doesn't really want to participate, but show of hands. Who really feels engaged by the politicians of today and the politics at play? No one. No? That's... Yeah? Well, Christina, then, how can data really help countries self-correct and deliver on politics, on basically everything, socially, politically, economically, so you have younger people becoming more active citizens?
I mean, I think young people becoming more aware of the situation overall, having data to be able to back up their demands and their sort of requests to their decision makers, I think is helpful. But data is only going to get us so far. And I think that our colleague here from Council of Europe was quite clear in the sense of we're lacking actually political will, right? Again, we're not lacking solutions, but it is political will. And I think one part of the research, which perhaps went under the radar, but for me it was an alarm bell, was this idea that inclusive societies come from fiscal policies. I mean, I think that this is actually quite the underlying message in the sense of why do we have so much exclusion? Why do we have historic deprivation of young people, and then also at the same time having rising populism and drives towards authoritarianism? I think that when you have a young population which cannot move out of their house once they graduate university, once they're sold a bill of goods that if you are a dutiful citizen and you're part of the democracy, you're going to have a good life, when you're sold that and that doesn't happen, and then it's very easy for you to start to think about scapegoats and where else are going to provide easy solutions. And so I think that, again, too, the lack of just primary spending, which is part of the fiscal report here that that the Youth Forum had put together, really does show that actually when we have austerity policies, when we just have basic needs that are unable to be met from the governments which are supposed to be providing for us, the social contract breaks down. And so again, too, we know a lot about what's happening. The data shows us only so far. The young people themselves are able to use the data to demand more action, but it is a lack of political will, which is part of the problem. And where that comes from is, I think, the bigger question is it all young people that are able to do that? Is it a coalition of other stakeholders that need to push for that? We need more government investment to be able to provide for young people so that we don't have this vicious circle. So again, I love data. I'm happy for it. It's fascinating, but I think that if we're talking about societal change, data is only one part of the picture.
Definitely, I think we need lots of people who love data. Hannah, let's come to what the index is actually measuring then. So it's focusing on social and environmental factors over these economic ones. It isn't really GDP specific. Do we really need to have this separation of the economic factors to really understand what young people need to be successful? We need to look at them, put more of a laser focus on what's really impacting them, and is that really the right way to go?
Absolutely. I think this is one of the most important stories of this index, that we need to go beyond GDP, that this type of measurement is not sufficient and has actually demonstrated that we are not able to achieve progress by only looking at the traditional way of measuring and our economic growth. The fact that the index has included sustainability as social factors is really showing us that we need to find holistic approaches to tackle these problems. It's not just about economy. Our current economic model is correlated, unfortunately, with higher CO2 emissions. It's like a one-to-one correlation, which is calling for deep societal transformation. That's why we cannot blame the youth. I think it's not only about that. It's not only about the voice of young people not being heard. It's a very deep change that our societies require, that our economies require. And this logic that has been dominating our Western societies over the past decades, focusing on the short-term interests, not having the long-term view, not thinking about young people, not thinking about future generations. Christina has made this point at the very beginning. Future generations, here we talk about a perspective of 20 years, of 40 years. Have we been talking about this? This conversation is just about to start. We have this knowledge, actually. This is not new, I think. We have this and have been having this knowledge with our common agenda report by the UN from 1987, saying that sustainability is linked with intergenerational fairness, is linked with long-term investments in the future, that we need to align current interests and future interests. There is no other way. But so many decades have passed, and it's only today that we seem to be really awakening and realizing that this is absolutely fundamental and crucial to us, to the philanthropy sector. I think this is a call to act, and I can reassure you that we are your allies, we're your supporters. There is a lot of work being done. There is a children and youth thematic network within Philia that is bringing funders with this specific interest, that are working together, that are working holistically, that are supporting our young people to really bring this message out in the world, because to address these challenges in effective ways, we see that even governmental spending and fiscal policy will probably be not enough. We need all of society really working in synchronization to be able to make change. And also, again, the point about participation, not just participation, but really meaningful participation of young people. We need these voices when policies are being designed. We need these voices when programs are being set, when budgets are being set, because this voice is underrepresented. We do not have deep understanding of what needs to be done. And this index, the Youth Progress Index, is giving us this knowledge. So now is the time really to act upon this knowledge, to implement what the index is showcasing to us. And philanthropy is a partner in that. We have a lot of examples where funders are really asking very similar questions. To give you an example of the Gulbenkian Foundation in Portugal, and I was happy to see that Portugal is performing better, even though its GDP is much lower, or half of Luxembourg, while at the same time the story is that the housing is still an issue. And the Gulbenkian Foundation has put intergenerational fairness on the agenda of policymakers, of academia, of society in Portugal, showcasing that if the society wants to achieve progress, if the society wants to improve when it comes to democracy, when it comes to sustainability, then long-term investments need to be made. Young people and future generations really need, and their interests need to be taken into account. And here it comes to housing, access to opportunity. It comes, it's about health, it's about environment. And I think we have more questions still than we have answers, and we have solutions. A lot of knowledge is in there. The index is providing a lot of pathways and a lot of signposts. And I think that it will be crucial, maybe next year, this index is released every 2 years, to reconvene and to have another conversation, another discussion. Where are we today? What has been achieved in 1 year? And to be really accountable to the findings of this index.
Do you think that it will be for sectors like yourselves, philanthropists, etc., to sort of do the heavy lifting at the moment, and then maybe governments will follow?
I think we need to come from different sides and push in the same direction from different sectors. And philanthropy is up to the game. I think the biggest story in this report that it's not just about young people, it's about all of society. This is the biggest story I think that this index is sharing. That it is about inclusivity, it is about our future, it is about sustainability, it is about democracy being back on track. So caring for young people and caring for future generations is actually caring for all of us, caring for the whole of society. So that's why philanthropy is up to the game. There are a lot of funders looking into that, working with young people. Mosaic Foundation in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Bikuben Foundation in Denmark, Gulbenkian Foundation that I have mentioned, King Buddha Foundation in Belgium, many other funders who are aligned, who understand that we need broad coalitions. And of course, philanthropic engagement is not comparable to governmental budgets, but it's not, as we have seen in this research, it's not just about budgets, it's not just about the size of our teams, of our organizations, it's about the political will to actually arrive at solutions.
Okay, well, Matej and Elena, you know, caring for future generations is obviously what we need to do. But when you come to the worst performing countries, so there's, you know, Niger, Yemen, DRC, Burundi, Afghanistan, South Sudan, how can these countries, I mean, beyond, of course, ending the conflicts that they find themselves in, how do these countries reverse the decline and provide some hope for younger generations and the generations that there are now, living through the realities of what they're living in? How do they do it? Yep.
I actually think, I mean, I would defer the question to the UN being from the Council of Europe, although I think that some of the problems that are countries that you mentioned are facing are already present in Europe and growing in intensity and impact. So it would be also relevant for that. I just had a feeling that, you know, my initial reactions I perhaps came across as a little bit too negative and pessimistic. So if I want to avoid having the role of the designating grumpy old fart here on the panel, I just want to say something that actually I think that the, you know, the importance of the indicators of that work when there is political will. We saw it in the presentation from Albania. I think that was a very good example how those indexes can really work when political will is there and things can change. Even when it doesn't, these indicators can help us to assess and point out and expose the lack of political will and the consequences of coming short on what they should do in regard to these indexes. So in this respect, they are very important. I think it's very important also to say that index and data is data. You have to put them into context. There was a couple of things that came out in presentation that I felt, you know, were very interesting. Was very pointed out how the biggest achievement was an increase in access to information. Yes, that's great. But I mean, in that last 12 years, that information has been degraded and deteriorated to the point that has to be taken into account before you can assess what that has done for youth index and for the society. We've been talking about the fact of the fact that, you know, the sustainability of the policies in the most developed countries. I think that is the problem. It's an issue. We also have to be careful not to start discussing the carbon imprint of youth progress. You know, it's complex. This can be very useful, very helpful, and it has to be a part of it because it provides evidence for our policies. And the last thing I just wanted to say is that for the Council of Europe, we have finally started to do what actually we are telling our governments to do. And I think that is, for me, the most positive element in this respect. We had heads of state of government, 46 of them, that actually demonstrate, in view of the situation that we are facing in Europe, after the Russian aggression in Ukraine, after everything that we've seen, that this is not this is becoming critical. That we are facing the situation as in the countries that which you have described before, that something has to be done. They had a summit in Reykjavik to respond to democratic backsliding, and what they came up with was a long list of declarations, but one really thing that stood up was the reinforcement of youth perspective. And the Council was not starting from the scratch. We have 50 years of experience of co-management that no other international organization comes even close to when it comes to involving young people in deciding on youth policies. We are taking a next step now, expanding that and bringing youth perspective to all aspects of intergovernmental work, because that youth perspective is not just important for young people, it's an asset for governments in bringing that perspective, that creativity, that innovation, that energy, that experience, that frustrations into that making. So this is what we're going to do. It's going to be very difficult because it requires, and that's for the national level or for the international level. It requires an infrastructure, legal institutional infrastructure. It requires resources. It doesn't come for free and doesn't come for cheap. It requires an investment in competencies of young people. It requires an investment in competencies and skills of those who will work with young people, and requires opportunities and respect of rights. So this is basically what now in the Council of Europe we've been telling the governments to do for quite a long time, and this is what we will now be doing in the future.
Is there a budget for it?
Excuse me?
Is there a budget for it?
Not enough, but I mean, you know, as all the colleagues from working for any public institution, international, national, local, will know, budgets usually don't go up. We are now seeing willingness to increase the budget for youth policies, to actually provide the resources necessary to walk the walk after the decision they were taking. Whether they're going to be sufficient, I'm not going to claim, but there is clear, there's money behind the words.
I would say therein lies the problem. Helena.
Thank you very much. Just to say from those countries that you mentioned that in human rights, at least at the international level, we say that there is no human rights paradise, that every country has its challenges, some more than others. But at least the countries that you mentioned are also plagued by war, civil strife, de facto authorities, which, I mean, impedes further the realization of human rights. And I think in that case, first, you need to ensure that you can build democratic institutions and the rule of law, but in the broader sense, so not just checks and balances, a judiciary that is independent, a legal system that works, and so on, but also at the very basic level to ensure a safe space for participation. And we spoke about, my fellow panelists spoke about meaningful participation. I would also like to add effective participation, but we also need to protect this space because we've seen around the world that civil society, youth, environmental human rights defenders are facing increasing reprisals and very harsh treatment or punishment for their activism. So in order to be able to promote human rights, we also need to be able to protect this space and the young people who are active in this. So just as what can we do? I think in many of these countries there is a very large percentage of the population which is young. which makes me think that education is one of the solutions. And again, I mean, I read in horror the latest SDGs report on the achievement of the SDGs. I mean, not only are we 18% on target on all of those objectives, but it also has a statistics. It says 300 million children and young adults who attend school will leave school and not know how to read or write. And for me, this is a staggering statistic, and we really have to do something to reverse this trend. And we also heard in the video the investment in the Erasmus Plus, and I think education exchange is probably one of the best ways to ensure democratic societies which are inclusive and ensure meaningful and effective participation of young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, I think for a country like Afghanistan is one of the examples that is going to be non-existent for the time being, at least. I know that we are running a little bit over. Should we finish here, or one more question? Up to you, President. One more question. Okay. So one last. Oh, we have questions from the audience. Perfect. Okay. So go for it, gentlemen. There, put your hands up with the glasses. Go for it. Yes. Or would you like to shout? Yes. Perfect.
My name is Michael Nestruk. I'm from the Republic of Moldova, and it was mentioned that we have the ambassador of Moldova. Yeah? Can I see Simon? Okay. So I am instead of her. Yeah. So I'm a journalism student, and I'm interested in the disinformation topics, and we're actually organizing in Moldova some workshops for teenagers in the disinformation field. And I'm curious if it's possible to find out some data on disinformation in different countries. Maybe it's possible to assess the disinformation level in the particular country, because we were speaking about the access to information and communication. What's about disinformation? Thank you.
I mean, unfortunately, I'm not much of a disinformation expert. I'm trying to rack my brain in terms of interesting studies. A part of the challenge is actually that the digital space is moving so quickly. So it's moving faster than we're able to really track it and understand it. I know in terms of initiatives, Finland in particular has very interesting education policy that they have implemented at the national level, which is specifically about disinformation and media literacy for students. And perhaps they, in their small ecosphere, have been able to understand the degree of disinformation. But yeah, no, unfortunately, in terms of research, I think it's a very big field. I think it's worth it to invest more and to understand it. But we're just scratching the surface of what what impacts that will have on us.
I think Matej can. Yeah.
No, I mean very quickly. Also, I'm not. I mean, tracing in disinformation is a very wild job and rarely accurate. I think you cannot exaggerate the amount of disinformation there. So I think what we need to really concentrate on is how we respond, how we deal with that. So the education that was mentioned is extremely important. And I just say that the work that is done, including the Council of Europe, on how to acquire competencies and skills that are necessary through education, through formal but also non-formal, informal education, to be able to deal with that is very important. And it just reminded me that it was in 2016 in this very same building, Bozar, that the ministers of the Council of Europe met for their ministerial session, and they adopted what has become the framework of competence for democratic citizenship, which is actually really about that, about the methodology on how to transfer, how to help students, young people to acquire those competencies that are necessary, including and especially critical thinking. Although the ministers, they didn't meet in the cellar. They met upstairs in a much nicer room. Cellar is for the young people. Ministers don't go, except the Albanian minister. But you are young.
Any more questions, just quickly?
Oh yes, thank you.
Could I quickly respond also?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. Okay.
Just another nonprofit that would be relevant for you is Defense Democracy, which is based here in Brussels. Elie Stoimeyer, she's been focusing on the topic for almost a decade. So she has a lot of expertise and you can tap into that.
Okay, unfortunately, you all put up your hands a little bit too late because Madame President has told me no more. The debate is over. But thank you, panelists. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, panelists, and also thank you, Marian Zaini from Euroactive for the amazing moderation. I will ask also the other speakers that we had today to come again with us on stage so we can have a picture, a family picture of this event. And before closing, I want to thank, while our panelists are coming, I want to thank our partners from Social Progress Imperative for the good cooperation that we have had to one more year build this Youth Progress Index and also to offer this amazing platform. Actually, I want to thank the developer of the platform, Bart, for the amazing work that he has done building this tool that that is now much more accessible to you all. I again encourage you to visit youthprogressindex.org. So then you can also play a bit with the data, explore the results, see, compare with the different countries. I'm pretty sure you will enjoy this exercise. And of course, I want to thank the communications teams of the European Youth Forum, also the policy and advocacy team that were engaging in this project. In particular, I'm very grateful. We are very grateful to two people that are here with us. One is Inge Bres, that had an important role in shaping this new edition of the Youth Progress Index. And the second one is our very own Fabiana Marafa, that you will see in all the reports. She has been the person coordinating the project and behind the results that you have seen here today. I encourage you all really to take the reports that you will find outside, but to visit the website, to communicate about it, to use it in your work as researchers, as policymakers, as advocates for youth rights. And with this, thank you again to all our partners to make this possible. And thank you to you all for being here, for actually engaging as well in the conversation and to be interested in how is the situation of young people in Europe. For sure, you will always find the Youth Forum on your side working for youth rights. And let's keep in touch. If you are interested in continuing the conversation, let's keep in touch and let's make the best use of this tool. Thank you so much. And now I think we can take a picture.
Stick to them. So.
Barty.